Right, good. Good there.
It is actually super impressive. It really is. A lot of AI is basically.
Hello. Welcome to IETF 120, the Grow meeting, which is going to start in about a minute and a half while we finish up our other thing here.
Seriously, that's the biggest fault. Yeah, well, it's a Thursday, so there's no bonus.
So the city of Vancouver has the largest port.
You have a picture there that looks like
It's a picture of Vancouver. So with every Grow meeting, we try to make sure that the audience learns at least one thing, and that is always on the first slide of the chair slides.
mission accomplished.
All right, welcome everybody to the Global Routing Operations Working Group meeting at IETF 120. Special warm welcome to the remote attendees. Next slide, please. Please note well various things. Make sure to scan the QR code to indicate your presence in this room. We use that information in lawsuits and to plan the size of the room next time. We also expect everyone to treat each other with respect. Make sure that if you present arguments, they are related to ideas, not to persons. Next slide, please. We have various resources. This slide should have been updated, but I copy-pasted it from last time. Next slide. Next slide. So we need a minute taker. Do I have to appoint a volunteer named Warren? Seconded, thank you. All right. Warren, thank you for your volunteer services. Our agenda today is packed, so we're going to be quite strict on time. This also means that we may need to cut off the microphone line at some point. Let's kick it off. We're going to start with Tobias. He has a number of presentations. Do you prefer Tobias or Tobias? Or dude? Or Herr Tobias? Or Dr. Herr Tobias?
Esteemed chair of the Grow Working Group, I don't care.
All right.
I would like to start with the other slide deck, please.
I think we only have one. Is it combined or something?
No, I uploaded two, and this morning I got like the confirmation that the second one also made it.
Find the second one. What is it about?
BGP stuff.
BGP stuff? Good.
Yeah,
Excellent.
like
First.
like the first one is the adopted draft,
Okay.
like the draft-ITF.
Is the second one this one? That looks correct. It's got your name on it. Let's try that.
Yes, that's the correct one.
All right.
Okay, so
Tobias, the floor is yours.
thank you. So this is draft IETF Grow BGP OPSEC update -03, together with Nick Hilliard, who couldn't make it here. Next slide, please. So at IETF 119, we have this really long draft, roughly 50 pages. The idea then, since then, became that the focus should be more on like short enough for policymakers to actually read it, generic enough to be resilient against change over time, testable, kind of independent of how it's implemented, and published quickly enough so it gets ahead of the wave of current efforts to actually revise certain regulations where we don't want to have things of the current BCP 194 in. Next slide, please. So what the plan was is split out the individual acts from the basket, keep the core of the document as it is, but move like all the terminology stuff and all the like implementation specifics to other documents. And next slide, please. first and foremost, be quick. Before things become laws we don't want to have in laws. Next slide, please. So what happened since then is that we removed all the text that has no timeless high-level directive policy feature. This text has been reserved for further use in 2 other drafts, which we will be talking about later. We also removed some more. In total, we brought the document down from around about 50 pages to around about 5.
Hold on.
Back, thanks. And we basically focused on the essentials. So basically, do not do stupid things, or do not expose your BGP speakers unnecessarily. Make sure you don't import NLRI you shouldn't import, and make sure you don't export NLRI you shouldn't export. Next slide, please. Actually, the current draft kind of fits on the slides. So these are the points for BGP session protection. Next slide, please. Then BGP speaker management interface protection. So you shouldn't put your management interfaces out there. Next slide, please. Then on importing NLRI, basically make sure that actually what you import is like has the party announcing it to you being authorized to announce it. There's a couple of exceptions which you can have, and between 2 consenting ASs, you can basically announce whatever you want as long as you make sure it doesn't leak outside. Next slide, please. And the same kind of also is valid for like redistributing NLRI. Kind of basically boils down to the same thing. Don't do things you're not supposed to do. Next slide, please. Then there's a general consideration on altering NLRI. There's also a compounding draft in CyberOps on not annotating API validation state with transitive attributes. And you shouldn't do things to attributes you don't know what they are about. Like you should just ignore them. Next slide, please. So the next steps for this draft would be we have to somehow reach working group consensus. We basically need to figure out what still can be taken away because there's actually not really that much left which can be removed. We have to think about what can be added. The metric I'm suggesting here, if there's more than 2 mails or 2 minutes of discussion on if something should be added, it belongs in another draft. And when we are there that we do kind of feel like there is consensus, we should move to working group last call, in our opinion as authors. Next slide, please. So we can either now discuss this, or we can do the presentation of the other 2 individual drafts which are currently being submitted. I don't know what the chairs prefer.
We have a little bit of time for discussion. So if there's anybody in the audience that has preferences on the future direction of BCP 194, that would be...
Especially in the context of how can we move forward quickly.
Okay, well, instead of waiting to be called on, since the air is dead, I'll just start talking. One nice thing about BCPs is that they are aggregates of multiple RFCs potentially. So I think that speaks strongly in favor of going ahead with the slim document that you have. Kick out 7454, sub in your document, and then if people want to fill in all the cracks, they can add another RFC to the set of RFCs that comprises BCP 194. So in other words, go fast, it's cool.
Ben Madison from Work Online. I'm broadly in favor of the approach. I think that there's a kind of a practical challenge that we're going to face where different documents need to be kind of updated and kept current on different timelines. I'd quite like to have a sense of the kinds of things that you envisage moving into other drafts and calling out before we have that discussion in detail. So I'd suggest maybe we move on and discuss the whole thing after the next couple of presentations.
That's it? Okay, next slide deck.
Yep.
I updated the order.
So, two submitted individual drafts, grow routing OPSEC informational and grow routing ops terms, basically recycling redundant drafts. by currently me and potentially you if you want to join in. Next slide, please. So the starting point is the idea we discussed for the 194 updates at 119, moving these things into individual drafts. And next slide, please. The idea is to have like 2 informational drafts, which are more easy to update than a BCP. The first one would cover basically most of the implementation related parts of what used to be in the BCP 194 update. And the second one would mostly contain what was there as terms. Next slide, please. So yeah, no, not relevant slide, thank you. So for the OPSEC informational, it basically borrows the structure and content from the draft IETF Grow BGP OPSEC update -01. Which is mostly concrete ways to implement certain things, like concrete ways to make sure that you're not announcing NLRI or that you're not importing NLRI, which you shouldn't import. Sadly, there's often multiple ways to accomplish the same thing. And the idea for the informational document would be to note like the various options you have to accomplish something without being prescriptive. So instead of being like to do Y, which is, well, we want to do Y, which is an option to accomplish X, you need to do, instead of saying like you need to do X. Next slide, please. It might be also an option to add an explicit TTL into the document, basically a best before, because sometimes no document or do not use this document anymore is better than having a stale document which is still considered current, which is kind of the situation we do have with certain parts of BCP 194 at the moment. Next slide, please. It should, well, by being informational, it can also be a bit more best effort. So we don't have to have absolute completeness, which is also a challenge given that, for example, ASPA at the moment is still a draft. So like, do you mention it? Do you not mention it? If you mention it in a BCP, it's kind of more difficult, etc. It's not an issue if some of the techniques proposed actually accomplish the same thing. You don't have to do any judgment of methods. Just because something is mentioned does not mean people should or must use it. It's just an option. And that makes it ideally easier to find some form of rough consensus whether what is in there is actually okay. Next slide, please. The status of this thing is basically where the draft IETF Grow BGP OPSEC -01 plus the additions was before it got severely shortened. There's lots of editing to do. There's a lot of room still for additions because now being just a technique to accomplish something suffices. And the big question is this something we would want to work on in this working group? And would it be possible to have a call for adoption? That basically concludes the first of the 2 drafts. Next slide, please. Bring us to the terms. Next slide, please.
Interjecting, we have noted your request for a call for working group adoption.
Thank you. So for the second document, which is basically terms, if you think about things listing terms, you think usually dictionaries. For dictionaries, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can have like a prescriptive dictionary, which says like this is how you should speak and which words you may use. Next slide, please. Or you can have a descriptive one, which is like a couple of people do this, a couple of people do that, pick something or make it into this dictionary with something new. I'm a dictionary, not a cop. Next slide, please. Obviously, we want to have the latter because otherwise we run into the same issue of having it very, very difficult to reach consensus on what to put in there. And we basically end up with a draft that remains a draft forever and never really gets anywhere. Next slide, please. So the idea is to have this document as a collection of terms. So think about the peering with a peer that is a peer is different from the peering with a peer that is a downstream. Which is like a perfectly valid statement, especially in the terminology of current BCP 194. And new IDs tend to bring in like new terms and actually tried to make this more defined and in general better. Still having it all in one place, including potentially historic uses of terms and how and when they used to be used might be really beneficial for the general understanding of these documents. Next slide, please. So at the moment, the document is just the terms and definitions section from the draft IETF Grow BGP OPSEC update -01. Probably needs somewhat of an open survey, like tell us about all the funny terms you've been using in the context of global routing operations and what they mean. In general, it needs more input on what should and should not go in there. And we would have to come clear about like what structure we need. So if it should have like a historic part and a current part, or if it should just be alphabetically, and many options basically. In general, the same question as before, is this something we would like to work on? What you would like to contribute to? Do you think this is useful? And if so, I would also like to ask for adoption for this draft.
Noted. Any questions or comments from the audience?
Staying quiet intentionally, okay. Oh, damn it. I'm waiting too long.
Ben Madison again. I think there's another option for organizing the dictionary work. I think I would do it thematically, because one of the problems that we have when we're speaking about this stuff is we have a bunch of very similar terms that mean a bunch of very similar things, and the degree to which, or the nature of the nuance between them, varies from person to person. And I think that that's going to be its primary value. I think your example was a perfect one, of like expressing what we mean when we say peer. I think that your general ideas for how to lay out this as a series is probably a good one. My primary concern is how we go about trying to stay on top of the revision cycle. I don't know. It's not at all obvious to me that the stuff that talks about the specific operational considerations, it's not at all clear to me that that should be an RFC, or a series of RFCs or whatever. Yes, living documents. We I don't know. I mean, maybe Warren wants to talk about whether we think we should try and reopen that can of worms. I mean, it's just so obviously the right solution to this problem. Maybe we can kind of approximate that by just having an ID that's like refreshed every 6 months forever and never goes past working group last call. I mean, I don't know, but I feel quite strongly that that's the kind of thing that we need, because like sticking a TTL in an RFC and saying, if it's 2027, don't read this because it's probably garbage. It's anyway.
So,
I think that's the problem here. I think that this group of people can arrive at good content to put in there if we have a means to keep it good. I think we should err on the side of not doing it at all, to be honest, if we don't have that means in advance, personally. I think we should keep it super hand wavy and like kill 195 and move on.
94. So general points. I really appreciate that you want to join in on that. I like your idea with the rearrangement. We can discuss Git access later. And besides that, we currently do have the problem that we do have this stale document. So whatever path forward we take, we have to get rid of that one stale document being around.
That part I'm in 100% agreement with. And if we replace it with something that says, like, the IETF is a bad place to write this document, it is all obsoleted, then if that's the best we can do, we should still do that thing.
Gee, thanks, Ben. Living documents. Ideally, yes, this would be something like a living document, but that seems to have been really hard to get people to buy into. So maybe what we could just do is something to what DNSOP is doing. They've got a DNS terminology document, and I think they're now on version 4 of it in around 5 years' time or something. So we could just sort of have the agreement in Grow that we will just take this document and we will do BISs really often. And, we don't have to always like cycle for 18 months, 2 years about making small updates. We should be able to do them fast. If the working group understands, we'll do this, we'll do another one, we'll do another one. It's a lot of faff to make a minor change, but it's possibly less faff than trying to do the living document idea again. There's no reason that we can't publish this and 6 months later stop publishing the next one, and 6 months later stop publishing the next one. It's stupid, but process.
Well, Rudiger was in the queue.
Oh, you Rudiger's in the queue. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I don't disagree that we could do that. My concern with that is that the steam goes out of that, and one of those revisions just ends up being the last revision. And I would kind of like the sense in which I quite like the TTL idea is that I think that it needs to kind of automatically die in a fire if we don't have the energy to continue that effort. Hence my idea about the kind of the living forever internet draft, because it at least does, you know, there's a big red sticker that gets put on it saying this is out of date.
I mean, yeah, that is an option. It seems like it's just a crappy way to do basically what Living Document should have done. Maybe if we do this, we can then revitalize the idea at some point of Living Documents, being like, Grow has had to do something stupid to work around our inability to sort our lives out. But yeah, I mean, if we do, I think it should be very clear at the top of the document. This is something that we're trying to keep updated. And so, you know, because also even when drafts expire, they now are not automatically removed from the repository. They're just marked with a little word saying expired.
So what we could do is we could put into the BCP 194 thingy, like for implementation specifics, look at the newest non-expired version of the following two drafts: A, terminology, B, techniques. You look nowhere if one of them is expired, and then do indeed this keeping updating. And honestly, I kind of like the idea because it's like basically running code for living documents, and easier to ask for forgiveness and for permission for living documents, I guess.
Once, going twice.
Okay, then we are quick.
Thank you very much for the chat. Next up.
Next up, Camilo from Nippon Telegram and what is the other thing? Telegraph. Yes, we noted two requests for launching calls for adoptions.
Okay, thank you. So this is Camilo Cardona from NTT. This is an update on the BMP YAN module. Next one, please. For this version, so basically, I think the model is, I mean, if you wanted to call it minimal viable product, I mean, number two, it's something that can work already. The document is huge. It's like 70 pages because we actually, well, besides printing the model, which is big, we actually go part by part of the module and explain what our ideas were for each section. We have examples. All examples are validated using YANLint. I don't think what else we can have there. So please read the document. Hopefully find errors. You find gaps. You find stuff that you don't like, because that's how we grow the document. Can you go back? Yeah. Sorry. By magic, we already had the TCP/IO option that Jeff presented last time. We already have like options to configure it, even though it wasn't. You know, you need a standard for that. But so it's good. The model has flexibility there, and we didn't have any option for configuring BMP in the peer group level. We added that. So take a look and give us feedback, please. Next one, please. So what is the problem now? So how come we are not asking young doctors to go and check it out and see if we can move forward? Is that, unfortunately, the model depends on the VGP model and depends on, which depends, all of them depend on the network instance model. The network instance model requires a schema mount. A schema mount is not really supported in general. The tooling is extremely poor. YANLint only basically supported a couple of years ago. It is a pain to learn how to configure it because you have to configure it using YAN library, and I mean you have somehow to learn it. I still haven't had the time, for instance, to go and learn it and do it correctly, and I just get segmentation faults and everything, so it's a pain. The know-how, like I said, it's problematic. I guess Rob knows if you ask him, but from nothing, learning how to work with it is really hard. And I really hesitate that the router support will be big on this one. And so I do not know if we want to just make a model for the sake of making a model and not something that we actually can implement. So, I mean, this is a general question. So next one, please. So what we can do, we can try to play tricks on the model, make it that it validates a bit less, but not depend on a schema mount. This is what is sort of doing now. We can continue with a schema mount, see what we can do with it. Maybe someday everybody will support it, or we can wait for other type of solution. There's the full include that Gina and Benoit are proposing, but that will take some time. Right now, the BMP feature set is growing, so I think it might be fine if we wait for a few months or years. Just see if the model supports it and supports these new features, and continue. Or we can always create the first version and then do bees. I mean, everybody seems to be very happy of doing bees at this moment in time, and so I don't know. Up to you. Right now, the model works. So give it a try. Right? Yes, sir.
I did a quick Google what schema mount is, and it appears to be a document from 2019, but perhaps you can summarize for the crowd what exactly schema mount
Right.
does.
So a schema mount, let's take the network instance model. So the network instance model, well, you're doing network instances and VRFs. It allows you to plug a module in another container within another module, but it does it what they call in runtime. That is, you don't really design with it. The router basically has to do some trick and put it within another container. Honestly, I don't think this is a good explanation because I really don't understand it very well myself. Or maybe somebody here can just raise their hand and explain it well. I do not mind. Maybe Luderberg will do it.
Simple-minded explanation for me is in Unix file systems, you can mount a file system from a different device, and then it looks like it is integrated into your whole data store. And as far as I understand, kind of a schema mount tries to do the same for young models.
CS root then, yeah, something like that. But so the problem here is that within our module, we do need to go out of that mounted. So if we were local, it only within the mounted tree we will work. That will be fine. But no, we have to go out of it. And there are ways of doing that, but it's really hard to do it. But so the ignorance of my part or our part, because I cannot say of our part, I would say of my part of not knowing this enough, might be of blame. But the fact that routers were not supported, because I have heard of vendors actually giving me that feedback, I actually think that should concern the working group.
Yep.
So we can always just do, like I said, maybe doing these versions is becoming trendy. Maybe we do that. I don't know.
Okay, a comment from the chat from Jeffrey Haas, who unfortunately only is in spirit with us.
I miss you, Jeff.
Jeff says, Camilo, it's okay if the model isn't perfect in terms of having everything. Yang augmentation works very nicely. The critical detail is to have the skeleton for the new nodes to be mounted later. I don't know if he used the word mounted on purpose. But yeah, I guess it is worth considering to get something out of the door and maybe refine it later on. Because
I'm definitely fine with it.
As they say, perfection is the enemy of good pizza.
So who volunteers to read the document and give a review?
I am assigning everyone in this room, including Sue Harris.
Thank you.
Jeff
might have
has.
not.
Have you read the documents at hand? The political answer came back. Not recently.
It is indeed a 70-page document, but most of it is just the tree.
Ben Madison, work online. I think the key to answering this question personally is whether there is something about it's not. The schema mount stuff's not something I'm familiar with. It's not clear to me whether it's unimplemented because it's not currently very useful, and that will change dramatically when the BGP model ships, versus it is genuinely hard to implement, and so the vendors are trying their best to sit on it.
I do not know.
I don't know what the answer to that is. It would be, seeing as such people with such information exist, it might be nice to hear from them.
Can you ask Jeff if he knows anything about implementing a schema mount in Juniper? Maybe he knows.
Jeff says I have to step out for a call. All right, we will continue this conversation, but it's good to note interest from both Jeff and Sue Harris.
So I'm sorry, I could not join the queue, but schema mount was very.
Can you mention your name and company?
My name is Rashad. I work for Equinix. When schema mount was done, it was very controversial then. I've heard from people who tried to implement it is that it's very difficult. Will it ever be? No idea. So.
Very good feedback, yeah, thank you.
All right, so the takeaway is perhaps try and avoid schema mount. And after that, we should review the document again. Next up. Jenny.
Hello. Is that good? Okay.
Yeah, make
I'll
sure
just
to
hold
talk into the microphone. Yeah.
This better? Okay.
Yeah, very good.
I'm Jenny Ramsire. I'm from Meta. I'm here today to talk about the peering API draft. We presented it at the last IETF 119, so I'll give you the updates today. This is joint with Carlos Aguado, Matt Griswold, Arturo Servine, and Tom Strix, but I'm here to present today since they couldn't make it. Next slide, please. Cool. So I'll give you a brief overview of the draft, then the updates we've made since we last presented, along with the work we have planned and the next steps for the draft. Next slide. All right, so the goal is we want to provide an API that lets you standardize the way to request public peering connections between two different parties. We offer a couple of endpoints. You can request new connections. You can list both existing and possible connections. You can also list mutually available locations at which you could peer, along with requesting to delete any connections that you may have. For authentication, we offer both OAuth or OIDC support from a variety of parties, along with RPKI signed checklists. Next slide. All right, so the updates since the last meeting, we've added a section on the RPKI signed checklists authentication. We've included a diagram to explain the flow of the API. Feedback was that it was hard to follow exactly how the API calls worked. Hopefully it's clear with the diagram. Please let me know if you have feedback. And then finally, we've tried to clarify the security and authentication section to make it a little clearer how exactly we expect this to work. Next slide. Yeah, so in June, there was a call for adoption on the Grow list. Thank you all very much for the discussion there. To recap, we sort of had 4 main points as I understand it. First off, are route servers in scope for the draft? Our position as authors is that there are no additional fields required in the current specification in order to support route servers. Everything that you would need additionally to support that should be available in whatever peering database you're using. Should I go for the question now, or should I'll finish this slide. Okay. Second question was, given that you have RSC, do you really need OIDC? No. We're leaving it up to the server to decide which authentication requirements you would like to enforce for your network. So you could have OIDC, you could require RPKI, you could require both. It doesn't matter to us in the draft. We leave it open. Finally, somebody asked, could we use Yang models? There are Yang models that are sort of similar to this API. Our decision was, no, we're not going to use the Yang model because we want to model the business decision between two parties for configuring peering. So the Yang model was too specific. And finally, is there running code? Yes, there is running code. 20C, my co-author, has an API instance available now, and Meta is developing one, hopefully to be released very soon. Next slide. Planned work. We also received feedback on the list. You really shouldn't mention peering DB as the source of truth in an internet draft specification. That's very fair. We'll remove it and list it more as a possible example. Thank you very much. We'll further clarify the authentication. And then finally, we'd like to see more industry adoption for running code. That's hopefully in progress, coming soon. Next slide. Maybe. So the next steps, again, if you're interested in implementing this API as a network, please come talk to me afterwards. We'd love to have more people use it. Again, this draft is only for public peering. That was very intentional. We wanted to get the first version out just supporting public peering and just clarifying the authentication requirements for the API. Obviously, the follow-up is private peering, which we're starting to think about now, hopefully to have a draft coming sometime later this year. If this is of interest to you, or if you have any feedback or concerns, please come talk to me afterwards. I'll stick around, so I'd love to hear your feedback. Finally, the call for adoption on the draft went out in June, but it hasn't closed yet. We as the authors are wondering, should we close the draft, issue another follow-up call? We'd like your feedback in that regard. Any questions? I think that's all I got. Yeah.
QMySL MPI Inf, speaking with my small operator hat on. I will admit I have not read this draft, but what considerations have you put into this for small operators? I can understand this is a wonderful draft for large company peering with large company, but if I want to set up peering with large company and I am small company, can I just set up something that, it does the API stuff and turns it into like an email in my inbox? Is that possible? Have you thought about that? Is there further work to do on that?
Yeah, this is a good question. We have thought about this. Obviously, we cannot expect every network to run an entire API instance custom made themselves.
Maybe in the running code bit would be making a minimal implementation that a small operator could just deploy and connect to their SMTP server or something.
Exactly. Yeah, we've been in discussion with a couple of open source tools in the hopes of getting this implemented in the common open source tools like Peering Manager and a couple others. Hopefully, we want to make this easy for everyone to use. So yes, we're working on that. If you have any suggestions, I'd love to chat. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks.
First to Q, pardon, this is Randy Bush, Arcus and IJ Research. First to Q's question, visualize peering DB putting up an API or a web page for you. So I don't think this is a problem. But a question regarding the private peering, do you intend to do that as a separate draft or incorporate in this?
We intended to do it as a separate draft, but if the group would prefer us to do it one way or the other, I have no strong feelings. I just wanted to keep it separate.
No problem either way, just curious yellow.
Job Snyder's Fastly, some comments as just as working group participant. I think the implementation effort, having read the draft in its current instantiation, it might be able to do something in under 1,000 lines of Python. I think the API is pretty straightforward. So I think this is good news. And I think this has the potential for, if it gets integrated in Peering Manager, then arguments that it's not accessible to smaller operators will become moot. So I'm optimistic. As to the contents of the draft, I followed the discussion about whether accommodations should be made for route servers or not. And I think it is helpful to consider adding a Boolean field, this is a route server or not, because the moment you set up peer, so as I understand the mechanics of the draft, you and I agree to peer. You have to look up in an external source, such as PeeringDB, whether I'm a route server, yes or no. And based on that, you on your side will configure allow transparent AS, yes or no. And this dependency on an external data source for operational configuration management that is specific to a BGP session is not specific to an AS. Because imagine there's an AS that has both types of sessions. You cannot really express that well in PeeringDB's data model.
Sure.
So, and if the session comes up and you're not expecting a route server, but I am acting like one, then the first BGP update I sent will cause a teardown of the session and an error will be logged. So I think there's a case to be made to make a Boolean field, this is a route server or not. And I think this is beneficial to users of this API, because the moment you tell me, or I tell you I'm a route server, you can give me an error code, be like, no, that's not what I want. So it allows for more fine-grained application of interconnection policy. And then secondly, I think another field could be added, next hop self, because a route server may send prefixes where the next hop is not themselves, but
Sure.
a peer may also do that. And I think it is good if peers upfront declare whether they're gonna send next hops that are in the link net or not. And again, if I tell you I'm gonna send you next hops that are not me, you can throw an error code, be like, oh, actually that's not conforming to my interconnection policy. So I think those two fields have the same, should be in the same place as, say, the MD5 secret.
Okay, that makes sense. We can add that.
And I will yield the microphone because I'm talking way too long. We close the queue after this because we're over time.
Ben, work online. I think that the current draft is a substantial improvement.
Thanks.
I think there's a middle ground on the Yang thing. I think that reusing someone else's existing model is, I think, probably not the right approach. I don't think there's anything that's a great fit for it. I think expressing some of the types that you're using in a Yang module and actually formally describing the data structures that are involved here is a good thing, and would make especially kind of demo implementation writing much easier for some people, because you can just lean on the tooling. So I'd suggest looking at that, maybe not like right now, but as the draft matures and you've got a clear idea what those data structures look like. On Job's point, I half agree. I think the multilateral peering thing is something that needs to be expressed in the API. I don't think that you want to express that in terms of the policy artifacts that requires. I don't think that you want to, like, am I going to be prepending myself to the AS path? Am I going to be setting third-party next hops thing? I think it's a, I'm expecting to be a multilateral peering service. Do with that locally what you will. I think that's the balance to be struck, because otherwise I think we rapidly go down a rabbit hole of trying to communicate arbitrary routing policies over an API, and we become RPSL.
Implementation details.
So Tobias Siewich, Max Planck Institute for Informatics, for myself. I'm disagreeing with the Boolean field for the route server. I would more argue that it would be better to just throw in BGP roles there. So you signal to like the request of the BGP role, because then you cover the route server case, and you could technically also do weird things like this funny auto upstreaming, etc.
Allow me to clarify. We have an RFC 9234, which defines roles that peers have with respect to each other, and they are signaled in the open policy, in the open BGP message. So the peering API could reference RFC 9234 and have the role be part of the one of the fields.
Okay, I'll have to read that one, but I will read that one and consider it. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh.
Hello, this is Paolo. So 3 draft presentation. We start with the TLV one. Next slide, please. There is a intro slide as always, a problem statement. We are, bumping the version to version 4, and we are bringing TLV in all the messages that we have in BMP, including route monitoring that doesn't have it right now. Next slide, please. There has not really been any additional work to the draft since the last IETF. I would say that the draft content after a pretty shaky 2023, it's steady state right now. I would say we have just 2 kind of open questions on which, like, if anybody has a comment, I mean, would be. I thought we had the first comment. So whether we had any feedback on this. So guess, in a BGP PDU, we have, we can have reach, unreach, and things like that. So we have a number of set of NLRIs. If you have read the draft, you know that we are indexing the NLRIs, and we start like from the first to the last, and we start from 1 until the end NLRI. So what do we do when we have multiple sets? We just count from the first to the last one in the order, which would be probably my preference. Is the easiest, so no complications. Or shall we add any further complication like that? I don't know, like the reach will be a set 1, unreach set 2, and then we have sub-indexing as part of the set, right? So those would be, I think, the 2 main choices. I am personally to keep it simple. This point was raised by Luke, and it deserves some thinking. So if you have any feedback, any opinion on that, please provide that. And the second open question is that the draft right now doesn't allow a group to be part of itself, and of course that's healthy, but also that a group cannot be part of other groups. So now let's think about, again, the fact that we can have, sets, like we can have reach and the reach in a message, in a PDU, then maybe we may want to do groups of groups. So in other words, I would just unlock the possibility. I don't see it very harmful, although, what? Am I cut off?
No.
No?
We are being crowd-striked.
Okay. Yes. Fantastic. But so yeah, so that was the thing. So unlock the possibility of groups. I mean, I think it's harmless to do it. Again, if there is any opinion, I mean, just let me know. Any immediate feedback on any of these 2 questions? Oh, we cannot know from remote people, right?
No, remote people haven't said anything yet.
Okay. So what do I do? I wait.
Yeah, wait a second.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to click something.
I don't know. Let's try.
That's right.
Reloading your thing. No. problem is this thing has to get reconnected.
I'll ask you that code.
Okay. They said the public thing is having.
Yeah, Etherpad also had issues, or itched up, whatever it is, a few minutes ago. That wasn't my fault.
They're trying to get it fixed.
Okay.
So, do you want to go to your next set of slides, or?
Yeah. Okay.
You know what they are?
By heart, I only remember n+1.
Okay.
So the next slide was about what's the current status. So as I was saying, there has not been any.
The
major
slides
work.
are really pretty. You guys are like
Yeah,
missing out.
missing out on
Yeah.
something. Missing out on something. What I was saying in the next slide is that we should, action item right now is that because we are in steady state, probably we should start implementing this thing. So it would be very beneficial if there is anybody willing to do that. I'm looking at one guy in particular in this moment. Exactly, Max Sanz. Yeah, it would be very nice if at some point we can make an implementation of the TLV draft and prove it working, something like that. So the next slide, the next draft was about the REL, the root event logging. And I remind myself what I wanted to say. Right. So, okay, there is a recap of what the draft does. Next slide. Yeah, at least, I think at least remotely they are seeing the slides, right? Yes. Yeah, okay. So it's only for you. Exactly. What we did in the REL draft is we added the crossed warning bound and the crossed upper bound, right? So which are the two checks when you have a prefix limits, right? So the warning and the session was, for example, cut down. Fantastic. So we added the TLVs and code points in the event recent TLV, right? And of course, the TLVs are just 4 bytes integers, so where you can express what was the amount of prefixes that triggered the event. I did work out further another couple of TLVs, like the malformed packet TLV. There was some feedback from Bang at the last meeting in which we were debating whether this was overlapping too much with root mirroring, one of the use cases, and Bang brought a good consideration, saying that maybe you want to do some observation, you want the routes in one collector, and maybe you want to see the events in a different collector, so it makes probably more sense to have it in this draft, right? And then I worked out a little bit more the policy discard the TLV. Before it was just a recommendation to make a string, and now this a string that is meaningful. And now with the input of Thomas that is here, the recommendation, it's still a recommendation. It has been a little bit constrained, a little bit more. Thomas was saying something very true, that we have a young model for policies and a young model for BGP policies. And then essentially we could start to talk about policy name and statement, right, which are two elements recognized in these young models, right? So that's just a recommendation. We can talk about it, see if it makes sense, or whether that is still insufficient and we want to close it a little bit more. For sure, the idea is not to close it too much or convert the recommendation in something mandatory, because otherwise then we may have possibilities in which we close it too much and then it becomes not possible. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then rework the operational consideration and other, acknowledgements, which brings me to the point that, there are quite some acknowledgements at the moment. So for a draft that is quite, let's say, young, I mean, it seems it's drawing some, interest, and I'm happy about that. Second, next slide, please. There is at the moment no feedback to process. I'm still culpable for not having worked out all the TLVs that I have expressed in the event reasons. I will do that. And then there is the usual question still up in the air, which is good for the audience to provide feedback, which is like, is the message type good as it is? So it mandates that there must be a BGP PDU TLV in the message, or we want to make it optional, and so that would open other use cases. We could report on more stuff, even closed loop kind of operation, and things like that. So that's still a question that we should think a bit about it. Next slide. I have the next presentation, so maybe I take the question from, or the comment from Ben.
Yeah, my comment's very specific to that draft, so it's probably best now. I like the idea of trying to refer to the BGP policy model to find where the root got dropped. If we're going to do that and we're going to concatenate two strings with a comma, let's just double check that commas are forbidden in both the referenced fields, because that's a can of worms we won't be able to close again.
Absolutely. No, you're super right. In fact, it was just to have some text to nail and see whether we agree on the idea, and the comma thing, I totally agree. It's not a good thing. Probably we can do also a sub TLV or something like that, something more. Right, of course. Okay, fantastic. And so we have this new draft that was submitted actually yesterday, the filtering Adribbing and Adribout to BGP BMP receivers, which is a new work with Camilo and Mukul from Juniper. Next slide, please. The intuition is super easy. It's super simple. There is Jeff. I don't know if it's for this draft or the other one, but so the intuition is super simple. Like we can filter lockrib, but we cannot filter post policy, Adribbing, or Adribout. So let's just do it. I mean, let's have a flag so that there is this possibility. Two main reasons. I mean, first, we make all things equal, which is always nice, equal, consistent. And second, I mean, we have use cases like we can limit the fire hose of routes that reach a collector or that have been that need to be packed by an exporter. We can filter by address family and things like that. Next slide, please. So super simple, like we have a registry called BMP peer flags for peer types 0 to 2. Let's add a flag F over there. If we want to filter, we set the value to 1. Then essentially like stats messages should reflect, the filtered state and not the original state. And then if any characteristic of the filtering is changing, which a collector wouldn't know, I mean, we should trigger a peer down and reestablish the peering essentially. Next slide, please. There is also a recommendation that we should set the VRF table or VRF the table name or the VRF name to a meaningful value. That means just a string that makes sense for whoever is packing the information. And there are two ways in which you can do that. One, optimal for who is packing, which is like in the peer app, you say this is the table name, or optimal for the collector, which is like you do it in the root monitoring message, so that essentially like you don't have to go back and look at the peer app, what was the name that was in the peer app. It's an always like debate where should be the optimality stand. So for now, I'm leaving the two possibilities out there, and then we can discuss and see where life takes us. Next slide, and it's receive feedback, keep working on the text, and maybe working group adoption. It's really not a big drama kind of draft. So I would say it just makes sense to do it. So that's it.
Your request for a working group call for adoption is noted by Warren. Camilo.
Yeah, Camilo from NTT. No, just to say that we in the BMP model we have an option to configure the filtering, so they kind of go hand in hand. Just to give that.
Fantastic. Left hand knows what right hand is doing.
Thank you, Paulo.
Thank you.
Next up is Yisong with BMP route message aggregated.
Hello, Chess. Can you hear me?
Let me. Oh, I should not be touching this.
Oops, sorry.
Yes, we can hear you. Give us a second to get the slides on the screen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Yisung. Take it away.
Okay, okay, I can continue. Hello, everyone. I'm Yisung Liu from China Mobile, and today I will introduce the aggregated BMP route monitoring message. And I will behalf of my co-authors from the H3C and Juniper. Firstly, I will give the brief introduction. And the BMP route monitoring that called RM message is used to send the incremental BDP routes advertised and the withdraw by peers to the monitoring station. According to the implementation of the BDP group packing, as I know, many vendors have implemented the feature like the Cisco, Huawei, H3C, etc. vendors. And according to the feature, we have proposed a new type of the aggregated BMP ARM message. And it will compress the multiple BMP ARM messages into one aggregated BMP ARM message. And it will reduce the amount of the reported BMP ARM messages, and it will reduce the expense of the server. And it will update the RFC 7854 by adding the new BMP message type. And for the background, for the BMP group packing, suppose that the R with multiple clients and need to send the roads to a large number of BMP client peers. For example, for 100 clients, and most of the clients maybe have the same configuration. And the BDP group packing technology will treat all the BDP peers with a common configuration as a packing group. So each route to be sent is only packaged only once, and then sent to all the neighbors one by one in the packing group. If the practices are the same for the BDP update, so where if there are n peers and need to be sent, and the practices in the normal way, and the practices will packing from the peer 1 to the peer n, and we will packing n times, and the sending to the peer 1 to peer n, and the sending times is n times. And for the group packing mechanism, and if the practices are the same, and only once packing for the group, and sending to the peer 1 to peer n for n times, and we'll see that the comparison of the two packing methods, and the packing times will, if we use the packing group packing for BDP, and we will reduce the packing times n-1. So for the BMP ARM message, include the common header and the per peer header and the BGP update BTU. And for the if the practices are the same, if we have n peers and may need to the package n times and assemble n ARM messages to send to the server in a normal way. In this, if we use the aggregated BMP route monitor message, and we define the format for the common header and the multi-peer header, and the multi-peer header format for the per peer header from 1 to n. If the BP path attribute for each of the per peer header, it can carry the unique BDP path attribute of the corresponding per peer. If no BDP path attribute is carried, so the per peer header only contains the peer address. And if the prefixes are the same, so if there are n peers, it only may need to package one time and assemble one aggregated ARM message on condition that there is no unique BDP path attribute for the peers. This is the comparison with the BMP ARM message for the aggregated way. If the prefixes are same, so the package time and the payloads, or for the common header, the same BGP path attributes and the prefixes, the package times and all the payloads are all reduced by the n-1 times. So that's a simple mechanism for the aggregated BMP ARM message. So we welcome the questions and comments. That's all. Thank you.
Speaking as individual contributor, I think packing is a very interesting concept. We've seen in BGP that it can greatly reduce the number of messages crossing the wire. And I imagine that similar optimization opportunities exist in the BMP protocol. So of course, it's very tricky to figure out how to do packing, or whether it should be compression with dictionaries that are generated on the fly. So I encourage you to seek collaboration with other BMP implementers and find common ground, what exactly the most efficient and convenient way of implementing such a mechanism would be. I didn't hear a request for a call for working group adoption, but do you think the document is ready enough to take that step? If so, I'd be happy to.
I think I ask for the adoption. I will send the request.
Okay. Next up in the queue, Jeff Haas.
Hi there. Thanks for the presentation. So general feedback for the working group on that draft. The behavior we're looking for isn't necessarily to reinvent all of the pure semantics for group packing in BGP with all of its complexities. You know, the sort of long-term desire I think that the working group wants is that when rib out is used, rib out is a very, very noisy feature, and people that turn it on sort of regret it in some cases when they're running their stations. A feature that just simply takes the redundancy of the stuff from a BMP reporting point of view and hides some of that piece of complexity would probably make people that want to consume rib out a lot happier. And you know, that's the criteria I suggest analyzing it from.
Thank you.
Any other comments? All right. Thank you so much for your presentation, Yusung.
Thank you.
Next up, Jin Ming about BGP RIP statistics.
Yeah. Hi everyone, this is Jimmy from China Mobile. In this context, I'm going to introduce several new types of BMP statistics added in this draft, which are updates based on the existing working group drafts. Next, please.
You have control of the slides. Sorry, I should have said that earlier.
On your screen, you should see a right pointing arrow, and if you click it, it goes
Oh,
to the slide.
I see. Thank. The types of BMP protocol statistics are defined in RFC 6854, which can be used to collect interesting information happening on routers. However, the existing basic types cannot meet the observation needs. For more and more detailed data, the BMP statistics types need to be expanded. Perhaps you still remember that someone introduced these types at the Grow Working Group meeting of IETF 118 and 119. They can be divided into categories based on Rebin and Rebot. This meeting is mainly to clarify some changes. As you can see on a certain day in the past few months, we merged draft Liu into draft IETF, the content within the red square range, and in the slide is the main updated content. It involves the statistics of routing threshold, ESPass, and the statistics of RPKI validation results. The first 11 types are from the original drafts, and I haven't shown them here again. If you are interested in them, just click on our draft link to have a look. Type 12 to 15 are all about the statistics of routing threshold. The difference is that the latter two pay more attention to the routing thresholds for of supplier license, so it is recommended to use the enterprise-specific TLV encoding. The specific definition can be found in section 3.3 of the draft IETF Group BMP TLV event. The next type, 16 and 17, are the statistics of ESPass. And it's worth mentioning that we have added the statistics types of RPKI validation results in the draft. We think someday RPKI will definitely be widely deployed all over the world. Adding the RPKI statistics will be useful then. And the rebut statistics type defined in the draft is no different from Rebin. They are still the statistics types of ESPass and RPKI validation results, but it should be noted that RFC 8893 has some influence on the statistics of RPKI results in the case of rebut. Thanks to Jeff's comments in the mailing list, this type should not be reported unless RFC 8893 is applied on the routers. Still RPKI. So it should be nothing left here. Any comments? Welcome.
Questions?
It doesn't seem there are questions or comments at this point in time.
Okay.
Thank you so much for this update.
Yeah, Sam.
Next up is Maxence and or Pierre. I don't know.
Hi, I'm Maxence from Insalion. The first draft I'm going to give an update on.
A little bit closer to the
Closer?
microphone.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. The first draft I'm going to give an update on is BMP local RIP peer address. So the goal of this draft is to include the peer address of the peer you received the route from in local RIP route monitoring messages. Next slide, please. So we had received some comments on this draft. Basically, we were missing the IANA section, so we added this one. Inside, we have allocated TLV type for for multiple TLV types for the VRF import, origin VRF, the peer address, and all of the basically all the TLVs we find in the draft. And we also received the comment from Jeff, I think, that the address selector was sufficient for IPv4, IPv6, but not IPv6 link local addresses. So we added address type field in the RX peer address TLV, which allows us to define, to specify which type of address is following in the TLV value. We have, next slide, please. We have, so it looks like this. We have 5 types right now, which are self-originated address type. So basically when the router is the one originating the route, we don't put any peer address. The IPv4 address type, so the classic IPv4 address of the peer. Type 3 is global link IPv6. So one is straightforward as well. And then we have type 4 and 5, which are IPv6 addresses and the interface identifier they are bound to. So either an ID, like a variable length ID that is numerical, or a name, which is a string, basically, variable size string. We don't know which one, if you want to keep like both of them or just only one, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's it for this one. So next slide, please. Yeah, we had issued a working group adoption call. I think we had like a few people that were interested in the draft, but I think we still are in the working group like waiting for the adoption call. I'm not sure. So yeah, I'm not sure about that.
My apologies. I should have closed this call earlier on.
Okay.
I would argue there wasn't a lot of support in favor, but more importantly, there was no objection.
Okay.
So we will proceed to adopt this document as working group document and continue on it jointly. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so the second draft is the local pass ID. Basically, the goal of this draft is to have an ID that identifies a path that's exported by BMP. That helps us first to avoid network modeling, and also because sometimes network modeling, we don't have enough information to do it. So that allows us to actually identify the path without making mistakes when we're recreating the state of the RIP in BMP. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the changes. In BGP, you can redistribute paths. So basically, you can import them from OSPF or SS, something like this. Previously, we were not allocating an ID for a path that was coming from those if they did not provide it. So now, if you import a path from, say, OSPF, and OSPF did not allocate a local path ID, BGP should, BGP or BMP should allocate a path for the an ID for the path. We also added some descriptions of the error codes. So those error codes are for when you don't have a path, you would like to know, you don't have an ID for the path. So you'd like to know why. And we've made the IANA section with basically all the, like a registry for the path ID and availability reason codes. and some editorial changes. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we have an implementation in FR routing on fork, so it's working. And we are going to work on an implementation on the collector side, so probably in PMCT. And so, yeah, I would like maybe to start a working group adoption call now.
Okay.
And yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, thanks.
No, the adoption call has been closed.
Oh, sorry, word group last call.
Ah.
Right? Yeah. No.
Yeah, adoption call for the second draft. Yeah, local plus ID.
Ah, sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry, there was two in the same. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. It would help if you email the mailing list. That
Yeah, we will.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
As always, we as co-chairs, especially myself, are fallible humans. So if you're waiting for some action from the GROW co-chairs, always feel free to email us privately or publicly and be like, hey, I'm waiting on you. And we will take a look. So with that, I think we have reached the end of the GROW session at IETF 120. The next session is going to be in Dublin, in the beautiful country of Ireland, in November. And I hope to see you all there. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Well, 8 minutes to spare.
There you go. Made up time.
Hello.
Sure. It's always hard to email and say, tell me, what's up?